emotions at home. And yes, mothers, I know how hard that is. But you have to do it. And you go in and you do clearly documented, collaborative business. And that's what provides the best outcome.
Family, please report to child care. Attention. Will the Inman family please report to child care? Your children are okay, but you do need to report to child care as soon as possible.
Thank you. So moving on. So we need to be equal partners in this process. But you don't have veto power as a parent. The school system has that responsibility to write the IEP, to implement the IEP, and to teach your child. That legally, that is their responsibility. What we do as parents is we participate in that. You're involved, you're an active partner, and if you disagree, you exercise your procedural safeguards. There we go. And this is the process that you will start with a referral, and anyone can make that referral for special education. You can make that request as a parent. Or maybe a doctor will see your child early and they will make that referral. But once that referral is made, then we need to have consent. So there's many things through this process that require parental consent. There's a little word in front of consent. Can anybody tell me what that word is? Informed. Absolutely. Informed is the word in front of consent. For me to give my consent for initial evaluation or initial placement in special education, I need to know, and I need to ask those questions. How many in this room have ever went to an IEP meeting? You've sat down, you've walked in, there may be 10 professionals there and you, and they hand you your procedural safeguards. You know that sheet that said, these are your rights? And they hand them to you like this, and they go, do you understand? And what do you do? Yes. Shake your head, yes. But do you know? Do you really know what those procedural safeguards are? No. So if you don't know, ask. There is absolutely no shame in not knowing. There's no preparation to become a parent of a child with a disability. Where the shame is in not asking. So continuously ask those questions. If you go through that evaluation process, then you want to meet with that evaluator and you want a full explanation of that evaluation before you get to the table. Because once you get there, how many of you sat through an IEP meeting with an hour of listening to a psychologist? And they like to talk. They really do. And then they ask you, do you understand? And what do you say? Yes, I understand. I don't want to appear dumb. But you don't. And it's so important that you do, because those evaluations are the baseline of the entire process. So whenever we're determining through evaluation, and how many of you have a perfect day? Every day. Anybody besides me? Oh, your children are the same way. Maybe I stayed up real late last night watching TV and you didn't know about it. Maybe I just didn't sleep well. Maybe somebody said something on the bus on the way to school, and here, this is just a snapshot in time where I'm sitting down, you're administering tests to me, that's going to make the whole basis for this process. That's why you're involved in a parent, because you have that day-to-day knowledge of the child to be able to help and provide that input to say that evaluation isn't right. That doesn't really say what my child does. Consent for evaluation is conditional. So if you have a child that has fatigue problems, they can only stay focused for 15 minutes. So I know as a parent that my child is not going to be able to be tested more than 15 minutes at a time without a break. So I'm going to give conditional consent to say, yes, you can evaluate my child after you explain to me the evaluations and what they are and what they mean, and that when you test them, it'll be in increments. You have a right to observe those tests as long as you don't interfere. So you can observe the evaluation. A lot of schools have a window, two-way window, which you can observe a classroom, or something to where you can observe those the evaluation as they're being conducted. Once we go through the evaluation process, and we all have IEPs in the room, correct? So we've all been through the initial eligibility. No ticky, no flighty. So you have to become eligible under IDEA or Section 504, which I'm doing that workshop a little later on today, to be able to get the protections of the law and the procedural safeguards. So we've been through the eligibility meeting, and then we have our initial IEP meeting. And we sit down and we write that IEP, and only after, do you notice that placement comes after? So IEPs are written for children. They're not written for programs. They're not written for placement. You don't predetermine the placement prior to the writing of the IEP. The IEP drives that placement in the services. So we write that IEP, and then we talk about placement backing up to the least restrictive environment. That's where we begin, that regular ed setting for that initial placement. And only moving outward on a line of continuum do we do when the child cannot make that progress. Let's take a second on if response to intervention, RTI, which is a new thing under IDEA. And what response to intervention is put into place, and I believe we got a workshop here today on RTI.
Just add it.
What response to intervention was put into place is so we don't over-identify kids who don't belong in special ed, who it may be some other factor such as language or socioeconomics in the home or just not being taught. Maybe I got a bad teacher for a year or two. And so what RTI does is we're using scientifically based research and instruction, so we know it works with kids, and we're applying it across the regular education environment as a whole. And we're doing that in academics as well as we're doing it in behaviors. So what RTI is, and a lot of folks say, well, that's, we're going to be identifying less children. Well, what we're doing is we're getting that help to them sooner. So they're actually getting the tier 3, it's 3 levels of instruction. They're getting that help sooner without having to qualify, go through the process, and become eligible. They're getting that. And it's only when a child does not respond that we start saying, well, maybe we need specially designed instruction. And to qualify for an IEP, you have to need the specially designed instruction or to be taught by a special education teacher. It requires that to have an IEP. And so we go through that referral process. Anytime in that referral process, if a parent makes a written request for evaluation and grants the consent, we start a 60-day timeline, 60 days that the child is in attendance to complete the evaluation. So you as a parent, if you feel that your child really needs it, then the RTI process, when that consent is made, it still continues. It will continue in regular ed everywhere that you go, but we start looking at the referral for specially designed instruction.
Question. Is the RTI automatic, or would you be
It's automatic.
required?
Automatic.
So they're just doing it with you being
They're doing it with everybody in the
extra
building. It's
services.
in
Okay.
regular ed. The RTI is out there in the classrooms. They're looking at children who are struggling. And they're starting those 3 tiers of intervention. And they're using that scientifically based researched instruction. We know it works with kids. We've seen the results. So I'm using them with you. And I'm teaching you. And then you may respond. So if you respond to the intervention, that tells me you don't have a disability because you are responding. So you can learn. But when you fail to respond, then we begin to look at further referral for IDEA. And that written request and consent. The consent must be given, and once the consent is given and received, clearly documented, collaborative business, everything in writing, nothing personal. Nothing personal, just business. So once that consent has been given, then the clock begins to tick on the 60 days that it has to be conducted. And here's what's really the present levels of academic achievement, developmental needs of the child. That's that baseline I keep talking about, that the evaluation determines. So if you don't have those clear measures